Let's talk about ADHD. Well, hey there, welcome back. We're continuing our 13-part series with the psych charm ADHD. So what is ADHD? ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. People with ADHD typically struggle with finding it difficult to focus. They are easily distracted in pursuit of stimulus. Sometimes the stimulus leads them to hyperfocus. The reality of ADHD for many people is that ADHD is a constant challenge for them to focus. You'll see often online that people joke about their ADHD, and I myself have joked about somehow harnessing it. If you have ADHD, you may be very frustrated with your seemingly paradoxical ability to hyperfocus on something one moment and then have no focus for the things you really want to do another moment. The hyperfocus is almost never the thing you're trying to accomplish, but it does stimulate you. My experience with it is this. As I said, I would often joke about weaponizing my ADHD to get an awful lot of things done. It seemed to be the likely explanation for all of the disparate, disconnected things I was not only completing rather thoroughly, but also in record time. Case in point, all the books that I wrote in a short period, along with podcast episodes such as this one, in addition to the pilot's license I earned a year ago. But I don't believe I have ADHD. Though I am able to hyperfocus on something, it is not because I have a Pavlovian quest for stimulus. Instead, I've just learned to understand how to focus and how to pursue something to completion. It's a mental stamina that I've developed. In the podcast episode called In the Zone, I talk about being in the zone. Though being in the zone shares some similarities with hyperfocus, it's rather different. Hyperfocus of ADHD can also be so intense and all-encompassing that the person loses track of time. Being in the zone does indeed speed up time, but you still have an awareness of this time passage. And in fact, it's this awareness that sometimes makes you feel like you're just playing around when you're actually getting work done since you're enjoying it so darn much. This oddly happened to me with coding and also writing. I was working on some web development stuff and I was just having such a good time with it. I thought, man, okay, I got to stop doing this putzing around. I wasn't putzing around. I was doing some serious development for a client. This also happens with writing. With writing, however, there's a special condition of giving yourself a license to write. And I talked about that in one of the other podcasts. As a side note, we do tend to, in general, devalue the things that seem fun or easy, and maybe we should do a podcast on that. As I was writing the script for this, I was sitting outside, and across the street, they were cutting down a tree. It was actually a rather large tree that caused the power to go out for almost a day. The constant chainsaws were very annoying because they weren't like chainsaw, cut, chainsaw. They had a random, really annoying pattern. But I decided I was going to push through it. I thought, oh, okay, the easiest thing would be to get up and go inside. But I was enjoying the sun too much. And I thought, well, yes, this is a challenge and I'm going to have control over this situation. And indeed I did. So I actually finished the entire script outside. I did have headphones on, which helped. But again, it was about focus and stamina. And sometimes this focus and stamina is not what people who have some serious ADHD issues can deal with. If you have ADHD, how do you cope with it? It is common and almost a bit too common that doctors will prescribe ADHD medicine. I had my own encounter indirectly when I mentioned to my doctor that when I took or used to take a certain sinus medication, it allowed me to focus without distraction. She said one of the ingredients was also in ADHD medicine. I'm often surprised to find that the people who suffer from ADHD have an absolutely terrible diet riddled with bizarre modern chemicals. They tend to stare at the TV and spend very little time physically moving. I would surmise that people should really try doing some involved exercises. Even walking can change your state of being, as I talked about in the parasympathetic nervous system episode. And no, I'm not dissuading you from taking meds if you need them, but I think it's important to have a baseline of healthy eating healthy outlets and healthy exercise first. I think putting those things in place may give a little reprieve, if not a dramatic change, in what you or someone else might call ADHD, but by all means, consult a doctor. ADHD seems to be tied to and kind of powered by anxiety. And people can get anxiety because they want to get a lot of things done, and then they get anxiety because they got nothing done because they didn't really focus on something. I recently had a conversation with somebody who wasn't doing well at something, even though I thought they were doing phenomenally at it. And they then went on to tell me about how they basically did nothing an entire day because they were trying to focus on all these things. And that's exactly what can happen. You focus on all these things, but you don't spend enough time and you don't commit to one of these things, and you look back and go, oh, I did nothing. And I think it's an interesting lesson for someone, whether you have ADHD or you don't, is that sometimes you have to think ahead and go, if I look back on today, what am I going to see? Again, let's put relaxing aside. We talked about this in a few episodes ago. Let's put all that aside. What I'm saying is, if you actually want to accomplish something, you're working on something, you have mini projects, you have other hobby projects, you have stuff around the house, whatever your task list is, you're kind of excited because you have all these things. You're also overwhelmed because you have all these things. But because you're so overwhelmed and you're looking around and you go, oh my God, I just need a break. I'm going to go outside. And you come back in and you go, okay, well, now it's time for lunch. And now the sun's going down and you go, oh, okay, I did nothing. So my advice to you is, if you've been in this situation, this, oh my God, I did nothing, then pick something trivial. Pick some silly thing, pick the fun thing, and just get that little tiny squirt of endorphins by completing at least that one task. Because you looking back and saying, oh, I only did X today, is still better than going, oh my God, I did nothing today. And again, if your aim was to do nothing, well, good for you. But I'm talking about the people whose aim wasn't to do nothing. They thought they'd get 7 things. They'd just knock all these things off their list. Speaking of lists, my new book, Because, actually talks about lists, the psychological impact of them, and what you're really doing when you make a list. So the ADHD psych charm uses the infinity symbol to represent the infinite thoughts that one can experience while focusing on none of them, as we just talked about. It's the infinity of possibilities that can be so overwhelming. Paralysis by analysis, if you will. As with the other charms, I used a symbol that was not color dependent, so we can have some fun with color combinations, as well as having the freedom to use and display it all we want. Meaning it's a common symbol that we don't have to worry about infringement in some way. We can play with it, we can display it, we can do what we want. And as with the others, it can be used for something other than ADHD, because it is a cool symbol. And as I've said before, whatever it speaks to you is what it means. If you just want this cool symbol, some of the possible alternatives are the infinity of possibilities, the infinity of the universe and all it has to offer, reminding you that there's so much more out there. If you're a believer in reincarnation, that's kind of a cool one. Maybe you have a personal commitment, a very personal commitment that you've made, and to you it's a forever commitment, and this is kind of a reminder of it. Regardless of that, you can always pick one up at alchemyforlife.com/charms. And regardless of whether you have ADHD or not, whether you pick up a charm or not, just know that you are seen. Take care.
Living life every day, late at night, not okay. All I want, and I pray, all I need are some better days.
Do you have a story to share or a question? If your idea makes it to a podcast, you will receive a shout out as well as a token of my appreciation. Join the community, patreon.com/alchemy for life.
All I need are some better days.